The gospel reading at Mass from a few days ago was the parable of the talents, and that would be Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 through 30 or something like that. I think it starts at 14, verse 14. Read it in the Bible, but basic gist is master's going on a journey and he leaves money to his servants. And then he comes back later to see if they've made good on it and what they've done with it. Have they made use of it or have they not? Whenever I hear people, it seems to me when I think about this, whenever I hear people talk about this parable, they always immediately jump to, well, the talents represent your gifts. And I guess there's because in English, talent also means like a talent that you have. So I don't know, just people being people. That made sense, I guess, to a lot of people. And I'm not saying that that's like a bad interpretation, but I've just been reflecting on it since. And I started thinking the last couple of days, I thought, well, maybe a better way of looking at it is that the talents they represent like charges. They represent responsibilities that God is giving to you. But it's something about that didn't quite sit right, and I tried to think it through, and it felt like it didn't quite fit. I don't know. But now I think maybe an even better way of looking at it is that the talents represent grace that God is giving to people. And He gives us graces that we should take eagerly. We should take responsibility for. Every time God offers us grace, we should take it and do the best we can with it. And we see right from the beginning that the master knows his servants. He knows what they can do. He knows what to give to them, and he gives them these talents in unequal amounts according to their ability. And I think if you think of the parable that way, you could think of it it just applies in so many different places, because God offers us grace for all kinds of things. God can offer you grace to get up early tomorrow morning to go to Mass. God can offer you grace to enter the seminary to become a priest, something big, or something small. Like God can offer you grace to just hold your tongue instead of losing your temper at that crazy person at the store who's bothering you, or whatever it is. Little graces that God gives us, and big graces, and that we're expected to when God hands us these opportunities, when He gives us the grace to do the right thing in some situation or whatever it is. The expectation is like the master here, who's leaving the talents with his servants and saying, let's see what you can do with this. What are you going to do when I hand this to you? You can multiply this. You can make it even more than it already is, but you have to act on this. You have to take it into your hand and act on it and do something with it. You can't just leave it. It's strange when we're being faced with a free gift, which is what grace is, when God gives us a free gift. But true that this happens. I've experienced this, and I know, probably everybody does at some point. When you see that God is offering you a grace to do something, there can set in some kind of a fear or like a acedia or something. And I think part of that has to do with like what the Lord describes, the servant who buries his talent in the ground instead of making use of it. It's like a recognition that God does have expectations for us. And if He's giving us a grace, it's because He does expect us to do something with it. And all of a sudden we're faced with this responsibility, and something that is in reality a gift. It's something that is good for us, that helps us. It suddenly feels like some kind of a burden. And we are tempted to bury it in the ground and do nothing with it, because what if we mess up, or what if we fail, or it's going to be too hard, or whatever it is. And I just don't want to have to think about responding to this grace, because if I think about responding to it, I feel the weight of God's expectations that I do respond to it. So I'd rather just bury it in the ground, so I don't have to look at it, I don't have to think about it, and just leave it at that. So there's 2 points I wanted to make about this, in addition to just reflecting on it and maybe interpreting it in that way. One is I want to point out that the way the Lord tells this story, there is only one wrong answer: to do nothing with it. He doesn't even go into how the other 2 servants who went out and traded or whatever, he doesn't go into at all how they did that. The way the Lord tells the story, there's no wrong way to go about using the talents. The only wrong answer is to not use them at all. So the two servants that went out and risked them, both were rewarded for their efforts. And both of them were fruitful in their efforts. The Lord also could have told the story in such a way where, okay, one of the servants who did use the talents made more, and the other servant who used the talents failed to make any money. He tried, but he failed. But he did put in the effort. And the Lord could have told the story that way and said, well, the master was pleased with both of them because they made an effort, even though one of them wasn't fruitful. But the Lord doesn't tell the story that way. Both of the servants who made the effort were fruitful. That's not an accident that the Lord told the story that way. He did that deliberately. And I think perhaps what the Lord wants us to take from this, or at least something that we can take from this, is God will make you fruitful. If you respond and you accept the graces he offers you, whatever it is, something small, something big, if you are willing to accept that grace and act on it, it will be fruitful. You will be fruitful. You can be assured of it. Even if it's something like, I responded to a grace to try and bear witness to the gospel to an apostate Catholic, and the apostate Catholic never came back to the church. So you could look and say, oh, it was not fruitful, it failed. But you'd be wrong, because responding to God's grace, what I think God is telling us is that it will be fruitful, even if it's in a mystical way, even if it's something that we don't see in a tangible way. And the other point I wanted to make is that, although this is not explicitly stated in the story, because in the story the master is just a man, I think it's safe to interpret the master as being representative of God himself. So in real life, we know that if God gives us graces to act on these, he is the one who is going to cause the fruitfulness. So in the story, the master leaves. He's out of the picture. So any fruitfulness in what they do with the talents is all on them. But in real life, we know the Holy Spirit is the one that will make us fruitful. The Holy Spirit offers us the grace, we respond to it, and the Holy Spirit makes us fruitful. So it's God who is the initiator, and God who brings it to fruition. We just have to cooperate. So to refuse to make use of those graces out of some kind of fear of failure, I think hides a kind of pride, like a hidden pride, because it seems to imply that you think all of the responsibility for bringing this to fruition is on you. So you look and say, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. It's going to be too hard. It's going to be too painful, or I'm just going to fail, or whatever it is. Some part of you is looking at that and thinking that it's all on you to make good on this. And it's not. You need to cooperate. But the one who's actually going to bring this to fruition, if anything is going to come of this, it's going to be God, not you. So in conclusion, you could think of the parable, perhaps interpret it in the context of the talents being graces that are being offered to you to do whatever it is that God is asking you to do. Remember that there's only one wrong answer to not act on this, to not accept those graces and act on them. And all of the servants who did were fruitful in their efforts. And remember that it is God who causes us to be fruitful in responding to his graces. We just have to cooperate. But it's not like it is our responsibility, because it's outside of our ability, to bring to fruition those efforts. We have to put in the effort and respond to God's grace, but it will be the Holy Spirit that actually causes the fruits.